Good morning, Downtown STEM Academy. My name is Raid Khaled.
And my name is Pranav Mandura. Welcome back to another episode of STEM TV, Quarantine Edition. Welcome to our first week back in person. Even though we are in school, STEM TV will continue to upload weekly episodes, so make sure to check Schoology every Monday morning.
Before we start the episode, we would like to remind you that STEM TV is still looking for student-submitted segments to air on STEM TV Quarantine Edition Season 2. If you have any ideas or talents you want to share, please click on the link in the description below.
To start off this week's episode, we have STEM Sports, hosted by Michael. Make sure to watch today's segments for updates on sports in the district and across the country. Take it away, Michael.
Welcome to another week of STEM Sports. I'm your host, Mitchell Weiniger, and let's get into last week's and this week's sports action. Coming off a victory last week against Westchester East, Downingtown West has moved up to the 24th best high school football team in the state of Pennsylvania. Last week they beat Westchester East by a score of 35-14. At halftime, it was a pretty close game with West holding the narrow lead, but in the second half, Evan Wickersham, along with star running back Will Mahmood and wide receiver John Barry, came back to storm away that early deficit they had in the first quarter and came back to win the game 35-14. Unfortunately, the game was called off at 42 seconds left in the fourth quarter due to an unfortunate leg injury to a Westchester East return man. As you all know, today, at the time of the recording this on Friday, is Downingtown East versus Downingtown West. Downingtown East is coming off a unfortunate loss to Westchester Ruston last week. They'll be looking to improve that, and for next week, our next edition of STEM Sports, we will go over what happens in the West versus East game. In other Philly sports news, the Sixers are gearing up and looking to build off of last year's team as they have already cleared out shop on their coaching staff and hired Doc Rivers and a couple other assistant coaches, as well as they hire the former GM of the Houston Rockets, Daryl Morey, to help lead this team to championship potential. For the Phillies, they extended a qualifying offer to All-Star catcher JT Realmuto. He has neither declined or accepted the offer. For the Eagles, they are in a bye week at the time of recording. So by the time next STEM Sports comes up, I should be able to give you an update on their game. It looks like the struggles are continuing for Carson Wentz and the Eagles, but they are in first place in the NFC East. Whether or not that means anything to you, you take that as you will. For the Flyers, they have signed only one player so far this offseason and are still dormant in making other moves. Well, this has been STEM Sports for this week. I've been your host, Mitchell Weiniger, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Mitchell, for the sports updates. Now that we are back in school sports will occur more regularly, so please make sure to stay safe when at practices or games.
Next up, we have STEM Happenings, hosted by Aparna. This week's episode is especially important as we get used to being back in school. Let's hand it over to her now.
Hello, Downingtown STEM Academy, and welcome back to STEM Happenings. This is Aparna Vagvala, your host, and on today's episode, we'll be joined by the Philosophistry Club. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi.
So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves for us? Maybe give us your names, any roles you have in the club.
Hi, I'm Oak. I'm one of the club's founders.
I'm Zaina. I wouldn't really title myself co-founder, just more like he pitched the idea to me. I was like, yeah, go for it. And like, I've just been on board this whole time. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, and we don't really have any like formal roles. It's really just an open discussion club. So like, there's no like president, vice president or anything. So yeah, it's just a pretty chill club.
All right, well, let's get right into it, talking about your club, starting with your club name. So for the sake of our viewers, do you think you can explain its meaning?
Yeah, sure. So originally it was supposed to be a variation of like philosophy club, but that sounded a bit pretentious, right? So we called it philosophistry because sophistry is like basically bad rhetoric, like bad arguments. But what ended up happening is not everyone got the name sophistry, so it ended up sounding more pretentious. But you know, it is what it is. So yeah, philosophistry. Sophistry part just means like we're not looking for perfect logic, perfect rhetoric, like great argumentation. All we're doing is coming together to explore these topics that we might not otherwise get a chance to.
Yeah, that's a really cool name for your club. So from what I've gathered, it's new to STEM this year. So what made you want to start it?
Well, for me, it was just mostly talking to friends. Like if you've ever had like late night conversations, that type of thing, and just really bringing more people together and having kind of a club centered around those kinds of deep discussions that we might not otherwise get to explore, right, in this kind of setting. So just bringing people together to be able to do that as, like a school section club.
Hmm. What about you, Zena? What do you enjoy about the club?
Like Oak said, it's just really like casual, laid back for those like 3 a.m. conversations that you have at like 3 p.m., which is fine. Like it's just you get a lot of different perspectives and you can kind of say whatever's on your mind. And it's just a whole judgment-free zone, even if your take is like wild, as long as it's not offensive to anyone, which it never has been, and I don't expect it to be. It's just a really good time.
So that leads right into my next question, what you do at your club meetings. So how does a typical club meeting kind of look like, and when do you meet?
Well, so before each meeting, we decide on like a broad topic, but really that's just a starting point, and we'll go off in like all these random tangents. It doesn't necessarily stay in what like we set the topic meeting out to be. Every meeting is now every Thursday from 4 to 5 p.m. after school, and as for like the actual content of it, Zaina, do you wanna?
Well, yeah, we've covered like different topics. Our first meeting was about the trolley problem, which most people are familiar with. And we've kind of just branched from there. Like we had an AI one, we had a linguistics one. It was really interesting. Um, we had free will. That one was that one was interesting. I mean, they're all just like we start somewhere, and like the whole discussion, I guess, is the same topic, but just a lot of different branches of it. And like we just explore a lot of that topic, which is really nice. And it's really interesting to be able to relate it to like real world things that are happening now, specifically with the AI one. It's just like we see these technologies in our day to day life. How comfortable are we with this? And how far is it going to go? And it's just, yeah. And like I said earlier, just a lot of different perspectives. And you like get introduced to a lot of new things and you're able to develop your opinion on things, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm. So kind of going off of how you said you kind of get introduced to a lot of new things. So what different types of topics other than AI and stuff have you kind of dived into and learned more about that you didn't really know before?
Well, one topic that I really enjoyed was linguistics. So we kind of started off with the sentence buffalo, 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 and really went from there. Just like, what does it mean? Um, what do sentences mean? Like, how is meaning constructed? And then just looking at like all these different things that we normally wouldn't talk about in like a classroom. And I think it's like better than a classroom setting because you're not graded on your take. It's just really a time to explore all these like wacky things, wacky topics that you might not otherwise get to.
For
Well,
me, another, oh, yeah, sorry.
continue.
A really interesting one was free will because when it came down to it, it was like whether or not we have free will, do we care? Because it's gonna, if we don't, then we're just gonna continue to live our lives. Nothing can change that. And if we do, then like we do, we get to choose what we like do every day, stuff like that. And then we got, I don't remember which discussion it was, but we got to the topic of like minimizing suffering. I think it might have been the trolley problem.
Yeah.
And it was like, if we really want to minimize all suffering, minimize like inequality, then wouldn't you just get rid of everything? Like to minimize suffering, just destroy the whole world, which is like,
Yeah, yeah.
that's
Like the
not what you think
benevolent
of
world
when you
is.
think of minimizing suffering. But in order to reduce suffering to zero, that's the only way to do it, really.
Yeah, like one analogy that I draw is like if you have like a block of Swiss cheese, right? The more cheese there are, the more cheese there is, the more holes there are, right? So the more holes there are, the less cheese there is. So if you really want to like maximize the amount of cheese, one way you might phrase your like reasoning is, okay, I want to minimize the number of holes. But to minimize the number of holes, one way you could do that is just get rid of the entire block of cheese, right? So maybe minimizing the number of holes isn't the way to go. You need to rephrase your um, moral underpinnings of like what you want to desire. So
It seems like you guys have been diving into a lot of interesting topics, and I can't wait to see what you guys will dive into next. And it looks like we're nearing the end of the interview, but before we go, is there anything else you want STEM to know about the Philosophistry Club?
like we said before, it's just a really chill discussion. A place to come hang out. We start every meeting off with like some short introduction to the topic, maybe like a crash course video, um, and then from there we'll just branch out. We have like whiteboard discussions sometimes where everyone just like writes out their thoughts, and sometimes we'll do like a Google Slides presentation. But like we're trying to veer away from that because that's a bit like a lecture, and we're trying to have like a discussion. Really, it's not like a classroom at all. So yeah, it's just a super chill place to hang out and have these conversations. If you've ever had like a burning question that you just want like answered, that's like maybe not something that you would ask in like a school setting necessarily in like a particular subject area, just come here and we can talk about it really. And just any topic that like comes to mind, we can make that a topic for discussion. So
Yeah, I would say like feel free to come whenever. We definitely would love to hear new perspectives, see new faces, and bring your friends. Like if your friends go to East or West, I'm sure that we could figure out a way to include them in some way, like with a discussion post or just, yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing. And that kind of concludes our interview here on STEM Happenings. I had a lot of fun learning about the Philosophistry Club, and I hope you guys had fun on our segment. As always, I'll be back soon with another interview STEM, but until then, have a great week, and I'll see you later on STEM Happenings.
Thank you, Aparna. For those of you who haven't, please make sure to watch all of Mr. Campbell's videos on staying safe when in school.
Next up, we have On the Campaign Trail, hosted by Cami. Even though elections are officially over, it is still important to stay up to date with politics in our country. Let's see what Cami's got for us this time.
Thank you guys, and good morning, STEM Academy. Once again, I am super excited to bring you all this week's edition of On the Campaign Trail. I typically try to focus on global news during my segment, but during this period containing a great deal of election news, today's show will be focused on what is going on in our country. As you probably know, former Vice President Joe Biden was elected as America's president on Saturday morning. No matter what end of the political spectrum you find yourself on, I think we can all agree that this administration will incite a great deal of change. Today's show begins with the United States' formal exit from the Paris Climate Agreement. Last Wednesday, on the 4th of November, our country pulled out of the Climate Change Combating Pact between 197 countries that we entered exactly 4 years beforehand under the Obama-Biden administration. This questionable move was put into motion by former President Trump in order to fulfill one of his many campaign promises back in 2016. This climate agreement's main goal is to keep this country's temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius, or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. According to the International Energy Agency, the United States is the world's second largest producer of carbon emissions, behind China. America is the first country to ever pull out of the agreement. On to our second story of today's segment. Facebook was given no choice but to remove a pro-Trump group when a number of its members began calling for violence. Stop the Steal was a quickly growing community on the controversial social media platform that, quote, was organized around the delegitimization of the election process, end quote, which was overcome with, quote, worrying calls for violence, end quote, according to an anonymous member of the group. Before being removed, the Stop the Steal group had grown to 365,000 members. In addition, 5 of former President Trump's tweets were also flagged by Twitter, with a message stating, some or all of the content shared in this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about an election or other civic process. An example of these misleading tweets is, any vote that came in after the election day will not be counted, in all caps. Here's how each side of the story is advertising the event. The Center for Countering Digital Hate tweeted, Stop the Steal is calling on 300,000 members to protest at vote counts and contains calls for violence. It has to be shut down. End quote. Chris Barron, a pro-Trump public relations and communications specialist, believes that this is a sign of social media playing favorites. Barron tweeted, Is this how social media treated Black Lives Matter protesters? Our third story of the day is one that I am so incredibly happy to bring to you. Democratic Delawarean Sarah McBride has made groundbreaking history by being elected the first transgender state senator. Incumbent Harris McDowell announced his retirement in early 2020, so the race for the Senate seat was narrowed down to Democratic-turned-Republican Steve Washington and McBride. Sarah isn't new to the American political spotlight. McBride interned at the White House during the Obama administration and broke the mold in 2016 when she became the first openly trans person to speak at a major party convention. Her election success is such a great win for the LGBTQIA+ community and progressive Americans anywhere. Not only because McBride's win comes at a time where lawmakers are establishing movements against trans youth, but because her revolutionary victory may inspire more trans and LGBT+ politicians to stand up and incite change in this crazy age of profound and modern political activism. This has been such an unpredictable and unprecedented week. That's why I am really excited to bring you today's feel-good story. Violet Lentz, a 96-year-old poll worker, brightens each election with her welcoming call.
Hear ye, hear ye! The polls are now open.
There are only about 1,000 people residing in the rightfully named Wheatfield County, and many of them are solely encouraged to come out and vote by town legend Lentz. Violet has been working at the polls for 70 years, and says her favorite part of election day is coming together with the other workers, township clerks, and Wheatfield citizens for a potluck meal in the evening. It's really heartwarming to see so much voter turnout this year. And with that feel-good story, today's edition of On the Cami Pain Trail comes to a close. I'm excited to present you with more news following Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's administration once he is inaugurated on Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. I hope you learned something new and you're leaving with a smile on your face. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Cami, for those political updates. We can't wait to see what you have for us next time.
Before we go, we'd like to remind you to join STEM TV to help us create new episodes of STEM TV Quarantine Edition. STEM TV has a wide variety of activities you can participate in, including anchoring, hosting segments, editing videos or thumbnails, or helping live stream football games. If any of this sounds interesting to you, please make sure that you check the description below for more details on how to join.
That's all we have for you today at Downtown STEM Academy. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you again next week with another episode of STEM TV Quarantine Edition.